Welcome to This Explainer. I want to kick things off by just acknowledging something incredibly human. We all have days, or maybe even weeks, where we just feel a little off, right? Maybe you feel inexplicably sad, kind of anxious, or just disconnected from your usual self. And hey, that is absolutely entirely normal. But there are times when those feelings cross a threshold. Okay, let's dive into this, because today we're going to visually map out the 10 mental illness signs you should not ignore and figure out exactly when those common emotional dips might actually be signaling something that needs a much closer look.
So have you ever felt a sadness you just couldn't shake, literally no matter what you tried? If so, you are absolutely not alone. According to a report by the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI, what we often brush off as just a funk, or, a rough patch, can sometimes actually be a surface-level indicator of something way deeper. We're all guilty of kind of minimizing our own pain, but identifying these hidden signs early, that is incredibly empowering.
Now, before we get any further, I do want to transparently deliver this content warning. In this explainer, we are going to be discussing topics surrounding severe mental illness, self-harm, and suicide. I'm sharing this strictly out of utmost care for your well-being. Please prioritize your self-care today. If at any point the information feels too heavy or triggering, it is perfectly fine to just step away. Your mental health comes first, always.
To make sure this info is as structured and accessible as possible, we aren't just going to rattle off 10 random symptoms. Instead, we've grouped these 10 crucial signs into 5 core areas: shifts in your emotions, changes in daily behavior, losing touch with reality, the most urgent sign, and seeking help and hope. This roadmap is really going to help us understand the escalation from common human experiences all the way to severe clinical symptoms.
All right, let's start with Section 1, Shifts in Your Emotions. This covers signs 1, 2, 3, and 9.
There's definitely a gray area between normal feelings and clinical territory. Everyone experiences normal sadness. It's just a natural reaction to life's ups and downs, and crucially, it passes with time. But clinical depression, that is distinctly different. And this brilliantly illustrates the American Psychiatric Association's rule. If you're experiencing an abnormally intense sadness that lasts longer than 2 straight weeks, that is a major clinical indicator. We're not just talking about a bad day here. It's a persistent state that totally alters your baseline.
The National Institute of Mental Health actually states it perfectly. Not being able to snap out of it should be taken seriously. I absolutely love that they phrase it this way because it completely shuts down that harmful myth that you can just choose to be happy, right? If your sadness feels significantly heavier than normal and you literally cannot just will yourself out of it, that's a legitimate medical sign. It is not a lack of willpower.
Let's look at how other emotional extremes can point to specific underlying conditions. For instance, the Anxiety and Depression Association of America suggests that feeling out-of-control worry on most days for at least 6 months could actually point to an anxiety disorder. NAMI also warns that dramatic mood swings, especially if you're swinging between excessive euphoria and deep sadness for absolutely no reason related to your actual life, can be a huge red flag for bipolar disorder. And finally, as Healthline reports, extreme anger outbursts that feel impossible to rein in might actually be masking unresolved trauma, OCD, or depression.
Moving right along to Section 2, Changes in Daily Behavior. Let's move to and see how this builds as we cover signs 4, 6, 7, and 8.
You see, when internal emotional shifts go unaddressed, they inevitably start altering our external world. Now, taking time for yourself is incredibly healthy. That is positive solitude. It's exactly how we recharge our batteries. But isolation, that's a whole different ballgame. Mental health pros like Raymond Starr Jr. and Howard Dubowitz point out that if you find yourself constantly making up excuses to avoid socializing, or you're specifically avoiding things you used to genuinely love, that withdrawal is a massive red flag for conditions like depression, anxiety, or even a psychotic disorder.
Let's trace how a rough patch can escalate here. Having a few bad days where nothing seems to go your way, that's just normal stress. But Mental Health America notes a major warning sign is when that rough patch stretches past 2 weeks and starts hurting your ability to function in normal, everyday situations. And if that inability to function drags on toward 2 months, well, as the Australian Department of Health outlines, you are well beyond a simple rough patch. That is a loud and clear signal of clinical depression or anxiety. And this brings us to something I think we overlook way too often: the vital connection between our minds and our sleep. Check this out. While 10 to 18% of the general population struggles with sleep, Harvard Medical School found that up to 50% of people living with ADHD, depression, anxiety, or bipolar disorder suffer from sleep issues. That is a huge jump. And it's not just insomnia, by the way. Hypersomnia, which means sleeping far too much, is an equally powerful behavioral sign that your brain is really struggling to regulate itself.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is a pretty striking statistic about how we cope. According to mentalhealth.gov, 1 in 4 individuals who live with mental illness symptoms use alcohol or drugs to self-medicate. Basically, they're desperately trying to numb out intense anger, anxiety, or manic episodes. When we start recognizing substance abuse not just as a bad habit, but as a misguided coping mechanism for an underlying mental health disorder, it completely transforms how we should approach getting help.
Okay, Section 3, Losing Touch with Reality. This brings us to Sign 5, which is psychosis.
I want to guide us through this one with a lot of care because clinical terminology can sound really intimidating. Psychosis basically involves hallucinations or delusions. Researchers describe it as a sense of perception or a belief that feels so real to the person experiencing it that it creates a massive sense of urgency. To them, the threat or the belief is absolute reality, despite clear external evidence that it's not. Breaking it down like this really helps us see psychosis not as something terrifying out of a movie, but as a profound perceptual misfire in the brain that requires genuine medical compassion.
And if you're sitting there thinking psychosis is exceedingly rare, just look at this number. According to NAMI, 3 out of every 100 people will experience a psychotic episode in their lifetimes as a symptom of a physical or mental illness, like schizophrenia. That means literally millions of people will face this. These extreme symptoms are far more common than our cultural conversations usually admit, and shedding light on these numbers is absolutely crucial for erasing the stigma.
Which brings us to Section 4, the most urgent sign. This is Sign 10, self-harm.
This is, without a doubt, the most critical warning sign we're discussing today. If you have started having thoughts of self-harm or suicide, I really need you to know that your struggle is valid and you are not fundamentally broken. The Mental Health Foundation actually reports that up to 10% of people under the age of 30 have had these thoughts. They often stem from profound pain, things like abuse, severe neglect, a major loss, or a trauma that you feel you just can't control. It's a sign of a brain that is totally overwhelmed by suffering, not a personal failure.
So, the crucial point is this. A 2018 report by Bradwick found that approximately 90% of people who completed suicide also suffered from a severe mental illness, like bipolar disorder or depression. Why am I sharing this? Because it proves that these tragic outcomes are deeply intertwined with treatable illnesses. Medical and professional intervention is literally life-saving. When we treat the underlying illness, we restore hope.
Finally, let's move to Section 5, Seeking Help and Hope. Let's look at some actionable steps.
Listen, if you recognized yourself or someone you love in any of these 10 signs today, just identifying them is a huge, empowering first step toward healing, stability, and reclaiming your life. I highly encourage you to take a screenshot of these actionable next steps. You can contact your insurance company to find covered therapists. You can reach out to a local college student counseling clinic, which, by the way, often offers fantastic low-cost care. Or you can immediately call your county crisis line if you need urgent support. You are not bad for feeling the way you do, and you absolutely deserve to get the help you need to feel better.
So I want to leave you with this. What is one step you can take today to prioritize your mental health? Maybe it's making a phone call, or hey, maybe it's just being a little kinder to yourself this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me today to walk through this explainer. Just remember,